everyone. Hi, Juli. Welcome to a new episode of the Mashtia Collective podcast. Today, we'll be talking about an idea or a topic that I guess came out of our last episode on Sarah J. Maas, and it's basically like this idea of knowing when to stop. I think that in our, today, from a few years back, but the whole motivation, you can do it, keep going rhetoric is very much what's in. It's very much what we hear all the time. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's something to be said about also knowing kind of when to stop. Either when to stop activity, when to stop a project, just when to stop even a mindset. I think it's not always great or always applicable to just keep going.
Yeah.
How the way many people would have you believe. Mm-hmm. Do you have any personal kind of experience with this idea or this topic?
Yeah, I think there's something that I kind of think about a lot because through therapy too, and I feel like I've mentioned therapy in this podcast so much, but it's just because it's been so life-changing for me. I've learned a lot, the concepts of I think the way to say it is when things no longer serve you. And that's something that for example, I've tried to talk to my mom about a lot. It's sometimes, especially when you grow up in a different culture than the one you're currently living in, or in a different time, because you know how times are always changing, and sometimes things change and sometimes other things stop because they no longer serve you. For example, for me, and you know this because you've known me forever, but I've always been very... I used to be, I want to believe I'm not this way anymore, but I used to be very hard on myself. And I still am to a certain extent, but not nearly as much as I used to be. I was a big perfectionist and sometimes I felt if I didn't get things perfect or if I didn't get things a certain way, then it wouldn't be valuable and things like that. And that kind of mindset carried me through a season in my life where I needed it to be able to continue to move forward, But there's a point, and it was helpful, and it was informative to a certain extent for a season of my life where I needed it. But then there's a point where that is no longer applicable, and that's when you feel it does you more harm than good. Mm-hmm. And when you decide, I guess as a person, it's okay, this is no longer serving me. The issue there is then you have to reconnect all your mental pathways and kind of retrain yourself to not fall into that rut. Or into that, routine of being hard on yourself when something goes wrong or something doesn't go your way. So I think that's kind of what how I see it. It's when things no longer serve me, it's a point of attention for me to take a look at it and see, okay, how can I tweak this process or this activity and whatnot to help it serve me better,
Totally.
I think that's kind of how I see it. How about you?
Yeah, similar. And it's so funny because we clearly have the same therapist and are having the same conversations about what serves me, does this serve me, how's this serve me? But I think, for sure. I mean, I'm even, to be completely transparent and honest, I am going through a bit of that season right now. Mm-hmm. When I'm having to know when to stop, because I'm innately someone who really enjoys variety and who loves being involved in so many things at the same time. And it is something I'm working through because I tend to have this very all or nothing personality. When I'm all in on something, I go so hard, so extreme, don't eat, don't sleep, just keep going. Kind of that mentality that we're talking about at the beginning. And then I obviously, because that is unsustainable, because we're not superheroes, eventually I, burn out and I'm completely exhausted and fatigued. And I move to the complete opposite side of the spectrum. I'm I don't want to do anything. I'll be on my couch watching TV all day or just doom scrolling because I'm just tired. I just don't want any more responsibilities or activities or, anything. So I think that in this time, in this season in my life, I am having to be a little bit more choosy about what I do. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I was doing was taking some prereq courses to apply to a graduate program. And I had already enrolled for two summer courses. And I realized that right now, as I mentioned before, I'm in the process of moving. My mom's in the process of visiting me for a few months. there's other changes going on in my life. We're getting this project off the ground, and I'm in Korean classes. Like, there's just so much that is going on that at some point I did have to sit with myself and say, you know, you have to stop. And the funny thing about stopping is that it feels so like final, right? It's associated so much to like to this idea of failure. Like, if you don't do this now, then you never will. But that's not true, because for me it was like stopping for this season. So it's more of a pause, right? But it definitely meant like kind of letting go of something that in my head is like, and this is also where the anxiety sometimes kicks in, where it's like, if you don't do it now, then when? Like, you're gonna fall behind, you know, on some like arbitrary imaginary timelines. So you have to push yourself to do it, and at some points you don't. And so I had to drop the courses, of course, be realistic about my time, my commitments, and say like, maybe not now. So that's like the other part of it, right? Like, stopping doesn't always have to be super final. It can be a pause, or it can be just like a pivot, or it can be just like changing the way things are done, or like stopping something and replacing it with something different. Like, it doesn't mean that you will absolutely like just drop everything and then not continue down a path at all. But it definitely does reflect some sort of change, if that makes sense. And I think that sometimes it's just hard to acknowledge, especially for people who, like you and I, are, you know, perfectionists and we can do it all, throw it my way, gung-ho kind of people. I think it can be very hard to admit that, like, sometimes, you know, we do have to stop.
Yeah. And I think that it can easily become, because it's become my identity too, like it can easily become your identity when you kind of when you identify, I guess, in a way, or identify with that premise that you can do it all, and then that becomes your identity. And then whenever you come to a place in your life, because life moves on, and we grow, and as we grow, things should, like, in my mind, I shouldn't be living in the same rhythm that I did when I was 20 years old. When I was 20 years old, 21 years old, even before that, you know me, like, I was taking 8 courses. I was working 2 jobs, maybe sometimes 3. I slept. I did my homework. I like all the things. I went to rehearsal, multiple rehearsals a week. It was a chaotic schedule. And my pride and joy was like...
This was the time when I was telling you, like, I always thought that Juliana at this point, and I genuinely, for a moment, did believe it, that you had Hermione's, like, little clock.
Time turner.
And the thing is, the time turner, and, like, because you said it last week, you hadn't even read Harry Potter or any of these things. Like, up to that point, it made absolutely no sense to you what I was saying. I was like, there is no way that in 24 hours this girl is doing all these things.
It was insane. And then that became kind of my identity, because I felt so good and thriving in that. Because it feels nice when you have a day full of things, and you're like, you finish the day and you feel fulfilled, and you have that like adrenaline and all the feel good hormones and dopamine and serotonin that your brain like produces when you feel useful, I guess, in a way. Like, it became my identity. And so for a while, that was how I identified. So if I didn't feel like the world needed me to do all those things, like even after graduation and all those things, then I would try to seek those things out. And then it's what you say, like, then it's a cycle of burnout, and then all in, and then immediately burnout, and then all in, and then immediate burnout, because you don't get a time to kind of just take in the world and balance these efforts out, you know, and take a look at your bank. So as you grow older, like for me personally, like I got married, for example, which is a whole other dynamic and a whole other like energy bank that I need to consider. And and you get jobs, and what the heck is that? I don't know. We're recording on Zoom, and I went like this, and I think I got a little like bubble with a thumbs up. Anyways, and I got married. You get jobs. Like I quit my job. Like all those things that you kind of as life moves on. Trying to maintain a social life as a university is time. Trying to go to church and trying to be for us active members of our communities takes time. Yes. So it's just like kind of learning to understand where like that we are finite people and where our energy ends. And how to best utilize our energy to continue to renew that energy inside us so we don't burn down. Yeah. And it's super difficult, I think. And that's can be reflected not just in energy or in appointments or in say yes or not to things like that you want to do, but also projects per se. Like sometimes I felt that today. So yesterday and today I had like a deadline for a project at work, and it were like two parts of one puzzle, I guess, like two parts of one thing. I did one part yesterday and I was like, well, since I'm here and I have momentum going and I finished that yesterday and I was pleased, then I'll start doing the other part. But I was so tired and so burnt out of that project at the moment that I just like, it was just being completely useless, and it was making me more frustrated, more frustrated than it was helping me advance in the project. So then I decided, okay, my energy for this, I've used it up. I can't keep beating this drum because it's not going to get anywhere, and I'm going to get frustrated, upset. I was hungry, all those things. And so it was like, I just got to stop, and I'll look at it with fresh eyes tomorrow. So then this morning, woke up, started work, and in 1 hour, I got way more done than I did yesterday in 2 hours trying to just beat the drum because I didn't have the energy. So it's kind of like on learning yourself. And I think it's something we talked about before, is learning yourself as a creative, learning yourself as a person, and learning what moves you and how to allocate the energy to best match that. No, it won't be perfect because we always have outside circumstances. Like sometimes you have your week perfectly planned and something happens and it throws a wrench and then everything kind of goes out the window. But understanding where in those moments you can say, oh, I'm going to stop doing this or stop doing that, and not see it as a failure, not see it as a regression, but see it as a favor to yourself, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, as a favor to yourself and even to your whatever it is you're trying to create, right? Like, I was reading a book recently, and I can't remember the example exactly, but it was saying how like there was this author who like kept trying to do like do a painting of a leaf and to like get it perfect, and he was just like all the time, like in the meantime he was practicing how to do other things. I'll get this story straight because now that I'm actually saying it out loud, I'm blanking on it. But it was something like he was trying to like paint other things just to practice. But he thought that his like life's masterpiece was going to be this leaf. And at the end of the day, it was like the leaf was getting, getting him nowhere. And it was like he became more famous for the other things. It was something like this. But basically, like, the moral of the story was also, like, sometimes, your projects themselves also need an end. Like, there are some moments that you're also not going to be serving whatever it is you're trying to do. There are moments when it's also kind of time to stop a project or to pivot, right? To do it a different way. And I think that sometimes that can also be hard when you're like so invested emotionally in a project or in your own like creation, whatever it is you want to do. Like if you're, say, writing a book, I know that for writers, like it can be very hard to detach from your work sometimes, or I can imagine the same thing happens to musicians or, composers. Like it can be so hard to admit that this piece that you worked on for so long, maybe, just kind of wasn't cutting it, you know what I mean? And maybe that the project itself needs to stop or to breathe. Or to be changed in one way or another. But for sure, I think the essential component in order to be able to recognize those times is understanding, like, I lost my train of thought. I think the key ingredient is that mindset shift of understanding that stopping or pausing or changing courses is not equal to failure. Yeah. But it's equal to to learning, right? And it's equal to to growing, to improving in general. Because as you say, like, unless it's a very quick project that you're doing, like a couple of weeks, chances are that the time that you start, you won't be the same person. You probably won't have the same vision, further along. Like in a year or two, say you're writing a novel, like you're probably not going to be the exact same person when you started than when you finished. Yeah. So it's like kind of allowing for that room for that space to change things, right, along the way. And sometimes that might truly look like stopping, like getting that manuscript and throwing it out, or putting that song in the back burner, because that's the other thing too, right? A lot of the times it's not a stop forever. It's a
Mhm.
momentary stop. Like I remember I read Stephen King's memoir. I've mentioned it before on writing, and he says like one of his most famous novels. I can't remember if it was the first one or one of his first few. It was a manuscript he had started writing and had put it in the drawer for years,
Wow.
and he was like, didn't even. They gave not even 5 cents for it. And then his wife was cleaning one day, read it, and was like, this is amazing. You should keep working on it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so I think that there's definitely something to be said about like destigmatizing,
Yeah.
not trying to keep forcing something
Mhm.
whether it's a project, an activity, or obviously within the scope of this podcast, but then even more broadly a relationship, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean, or a hobby or a career, if it's like truly not kind of going anywhere. But it can be very hard
Mhm.
to recognize that because of our societal kind of messaging around the how bad it is to quote unquote give up.
Yeah.
And also it's just a little bit of a blow to the ego sometimes to think,
For sure.
oh, I embarked on this and actually I wasn't
Yeah.
right, or
Yeah.
like the way I envisioned it wasn't right.
Yeah. It reminds me of like something that we've talked about before, not in this podcast, but in other podcasts and in life, like the kind of like taboo or the mindset that way, especially when you grow up in other, I don't know if it's just Latin America or if it's other places in the world, other like global south places, I guess, in the world, where like you go somewhere to make it, and if you go back you didn't make it, you know. It's like it reminds me of that. And like in a way it's like wait, especially when you grow up with that mindset, like I'm going somewhere to make it, and if I go back that means failure, so I can't go back. So it's a similar mindset in our culture with like the hustle culture, and it's like you're starting a project, so if you stop then you're a failure, you know.
Totally.
Or if you pivot to very recently, there's a podcast that we follow that's huge, Escuela de Nada. It's a huge podcast, and they recently started like slowed down on their content output. I don't know if you noticed.
Yes.
Yeah. And like they made they made a
yes.
statement. It's like, hey, from now on, this is gonna be what we're gonna do. Like, instead of doing 4 videos a week, which is a lot of podcasts to do in a week. Like, so we can barely sometimes keep up one a week. Like, we're doing a good job, but like 4 is insane.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're gonna.
It basically had become like a TV show, you know what I mean?
And
those like a daily show kind of situation. And it's truly like not very far, but quite far from the podcast genre and style. And I can definitely understand how they were just like probably kind of burnt out.
And there's seasons for everything too, because for a season the daily grind was what they needed to get to where they are now, but because they can't afford now to take a step back, slow down, and stop or slow down on production. For me, that's a sign of growth, you know. For me, that's a sign of like you've grown to a place where you know that this doesn't serve you anymore, where you know that you want to travel more or start businesses, or like, you know, because they're all, 2 of them are comedians and the other one is like this guy who does everything. So it's like trying to, okay, no, they want to do more comedy, you need to slow down here so you can allocate more resources here. So I think it's just it's all a game of like looking at the resources you have and knowing where to allocate. I think it's as simple as a budget, you know. It's like, okay, with a budget, I have $1,000 and I have this many expenses, and I have these fixed expenses and I have these monthly variable expenses. So I need to allocate my $1,000 over all of these things. I think it's a similar thing. It's just harder to tell how much like energy dollars you have, I guess, in a way. And the energy dollars also shift a lot, especially for us women. Like some weeks in the month, if you know what I mean, you have like 4 energy dollars, but some other weeks probably you have like 10,000. So it's like trying to understand your energy dollars and like knowing how to budget them, because sometimes you just can't do anything, and it's a struggle to like even work, you know, to get work done for your 9 to 5 job. And some other weeks is like, and I know it's happened to you because I've witnessed it. Sometimes you just go to bed and you're like shaking because you have so many ideas, so much energy, and you just can't sleep, and that's totally fine. But it's just like kind of learning to allocate those energy dollars, I guess. Yeah,
definitely. And I think the energy 100% the time, the attention. I mean, it's no wonder not why they say that attention's, you know, the currency of our
generation,
day and age or generation, right? And like we can only put it in so many things. And sometimes if something comes up that requires more time and energy and attention, that might mean stopping other things. And this really reminds me to a message that the pastor at my church shared last Lent. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Lent is this period in the Christian calendar where that is kind of observed as a preparation for Easter, for the holiday where we kind of reminisce about Jesus's death, right? And what it means. And a lot of people give up things for Lent. And I think that it's very sad that sometimes this is only regarded like, oh, as a sacrifice. Like, oh, one of the things that your religion tells you to do or something like that. And that message that he shared was actually very special for me. I never thought about it that way, where he was like, Lent is actually the season where we remember, just remember what it means, right? What this foundational, I don't want to say holiday, but this foundational date means for those of us who call ourselves Christians. Like, what is the actual, theological and biblical thing behind it, right? But the other part is like, this is a time to also realign our values, in the sense that like we often say we value something, but the way we live, the way we spend our money, time, attention, and energy is so different from that. Like, sometimes we say the most important thing for me is family, and then we only call them twice a week.
Yeah.
or once a week or once a month, whatever. Like, every family has their own frequency. I'm not, dissing, your frequency. But what I mean is sometimes we're very vocal with the things that we value, but the way we live our lives doesn't actually reflect that. And so he was saying how like Lent is this great period to stop doing something to make room for those things that we say we value. So basically, in short, he was like, you have to say no to some things in order to say yes to some others. And so like, and that's not true only for Lent. That's true for like every single day of our lives. Every decision that we make basically carries an opportunity cost with it, right? Like, if I sit down and do like watch TV, for example, that is time that I'm not writing, or that is time that I'm not spending with family and friends. If I go out with friends, that's time that I'm not working out. If I'm working out, that's time that I'm not doing. And this can feel very overwhelming and pressure. And like we've talked plenty in other episodes about how to, learning to give ourselves grace and navigating these balances and these rhythms and these seasons. But the truth is that we're not omnipresent, right? Or all powerful. And that means that we can only be present and doing kind of one thing at a time, like in a specific moment in time, right? Like if I'm talking to you right now, I'm not doing the dishes. You know what I mean? Like just physically, humanly speaking, we can only be in one place at once. And so I think that like sometimes there might be this fear of stopping, but I think that it's also a great opportunity to sometimes just like stop, take stock of our lives and say like, how many things have I said yes to? How many things do I want to say yes to? And if there's a misalignment between those two, it's a great opportunity to be like, okay, then what do I actually need to stop and say no to in order to say yes to things? So I think that also helps with reframing that idea that stopping is inherently bad or inherently a failure, because actually it might be the pathway to success, quote unquote, in other areas that you actually value more. Or that will actually bring greater value to you, your loved one, your lives, your career, whatever it may be, your creative pursuits. But sometimes, in order to say yes to those things, we need to say no to others and stop them either temporarily or altogether.
Yeah. And I think it helps like knowing, like owning the ownership that we have when it comes to saying yes and saying no to things, because it's like it's harder to say no to something for that a boss asks you to do, or like someone in a position of power asks you to do. And sometimes it sucks because sometimes, again, you can't say no to those things, and the things that you want to do, you kind of need to say no to momentarily to be able to do the things that you don't want to do, but that in the moment are needed for you and your
right.
But also like it's cool to remember that we have ownership over the things that we can't say no to that are self-imposed. Like that's the reason why I still haven't found like a morning routine that stuck with me, because I try to follow all of these YouTubers and their morning routines, and it's like, oh, I wake up at 5 a.m. and I run 10K, and then I do this smoothie with broccoli and kale and spinach, and somehow it tastes awesome, even though it has all these things that you don't
Yeah.
all those things, and then it's like it doesn't stick, and then I get frustrated because I'm trying to do something that I put on myself, that's only been me on myself, and that is not serving me for who I am, So it's and then it's really hard to say no, because it's like, well, I started this, I don't want to stop, because I want it to stick, because I routine and whatnot. So it's just, I'm not owning my ownership and being like, no, I put this on myself, I can also take it away, because I'm the one who's responsible for this thing that I'm doing. Especially those things that you were mentioning earlier, like the prereqs that you were taking. It's like, it's something that you want to do, and that you have the freedom to say, I'm actually gonna drop them because I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, or like, it's not the moment right now. I know, I trust that that there will be a moment for me to do this in the future or whatever. Yeah. And you own your ownership. But like, sometimes I feel like we just kind of give it away to the forces in the world, or we like subscribe to this mentality and this hustle culture that we can't say no to things because it's failure. And so we just keep piling things on ourselves and piling things on ourselves and piling things on ourselves, because society around us kind of tells us to. You sent me a reel yesterday of this lady being very like, it was a funny reel. It was supposed to be funny. Like, this lady being like, oh, you're telling me that I need to like work out every day and do my skincare routine and go to work and invest and this and that and this and that. And it's like, it's so overwhelming because we live constantly aware. We're being made aware by others through social media that these things need to happen, and they're all great things, but it's not, you don't always have to say yes to like all of these different things. And so I feel like we just give up our ownership to all of these ways that we can consume in our lives, because we get all these people on social media and books and podcasts and whatnot, and we don't take responsibility of our ownership. So, and it's hard because it's what the world is like telling you to do. It's something that like I talk to myself every single day, every single morning. I try to like remind myself that if I spend 15 minutes in bed more because that's what I need right now, I'm not being like a lazy, irresponsible person, you know? But then there's other days when I wake up and I'm like, oh, I need to get up and start getting things done, because that's how I feel in the moment. But it's just like, I think it just comes down to grace too. It's like being gracious with us and with each other too, because that means that if say in a relationship, for example, you are overwhelmed or you have a lot of things to do, or you want to like slow down and things because it's season of life that you're into right now, that you're going into, if you set a boundary, other people can get upset, you know? Like, we tend to be very precious with like other people's and their boundaries and our boundaries too. But I cannot get upset if you are saying no to something because it's not the season. And that's why, you know, being gracious with ourselves will help us also be gracious with other people as well, you know?
Right. Yeah, 100% agree. And I think just in closing, I think we've talked a lot about like knowing when to stop, just like personally. But when do you know, or how have you known that it's time to stop a project or to pivot in a project?
I'm going through it actually right now with a project that I've been a part of at my church for the past. Like I've been kind of in leadership and like helping spearhead it since possibly like 2019, 2020 for sure. So it's been like 4 years. And I'm feeling like I still love the project and I still love the premise, and like I'm super behind it, but I feel like I don't feel joyful about it anymore. And it's not necessarily because like it's not like I don't feel joyful, so I'm gonna leave. I feel like it's just the time where like everything's kind of like, I feel like everything's kind of just getting on my nerves, and I feel like the project can run great without me. So it's my season to step back. So I feel like in projects with other people where the project is like a well-oiled machine, and you start feeling that kind of like, I don't feel great here anymore, I don't feel like I fit in here anymore, that's a good sign. But also if it's a project that you start, because I've also experienced that with a project that I've been working on with my music for a while, which it's been like kind of like I feel like Sisyphus pushing the ball uphill kind of thing. And sometimes like, okay, I can't keep pushing this ball uphill right now. I feel like it's just being very mindful, and this is something I'm trying to think right now, because I actually haven't given this that much thought. I just kind of stop when I feel like I need to. But it's just being very mindful of the season of life that you're in, and like understanding that not everything needs to be done immediately, because I feel like that's kind of one of my biggest like challenges, is because I'm so impatient. I want to get everything done, and then I want to be like there tomorrow, but I'm here right now, and it's impossible. So kind of like understanding the like roller coaster way of life, and being like, okay, if this is not the moment, the time right now, like, it's not for me. My biggest thing personally for me, because of my faith, is like, it's not God's timing. It's very clear, like, it's not God's timing. I shouldn't be feeling like I'm pushing this ball up the hill. So I'm just gonna give it up to and put it in God's hands and take a step back, and not try to control, because He's the one that's controlling. So that was for me huge. It's like understanding that sometimes you can't control the world around you. So then it doesn't mean like it doesn't mean that I'm failing. It means that it's not the time right now. So maybe later, when I have more energy or more time, I can pick it up and try to push the ball up the hill again. But like right now, it's not the time for me to be pushing that ball up the hill. So I think those are the two things. It's like my emotions doing the thing, and being mindful of my energy bank, I guess.
Yeah, I think very similar. In terms of group projects, like where other people are involved, I think that the moments that I have taken that step back are moments when I've realized that I probably am no longer adding to the project, or that I may have become a little bit of a burden for my teammates. And obviously, it's not an immediate like step back. Like, there will probably be some communication and some, just like sharing of how I'm feeling. But I think there have been many projects that I've been involved in where there are times, well, even with you, like in one of our past episodes, we talked about the different iterations of this project. And at some points we've had to have this hard conversation, and I've had to come to you and tell you, right now, I really just can't. Like, I'm completely running on empty. And I feel like I'm doing the project and my teammates a disservice by continuing to be part of it. I think, in team projects, that's one thing. In personal projects, I'll be honest, I don't have the best track record in knowing when to stop. Like my blog, I've kept trying to revive it for years. But I think that just generally, when I truly feel like, or some things, even small things I can think of, like there was a summer that I embarked on a very short-lived embroidery journey with my mom, because she was doing it and she wanted us to do like a mother-daughter thing. But truly, that's like not in my wheelhouse at all. But I can't do it well. It was frustrating. I wasn't enjoying it. And it was completely a discretionary, voluntary thing. Like I wasn't, it wasn't a job. I wasn't profiting off of this. Nothing. It's just a hobby. And I think like, even if it's a silly example, because my writing is the one that I've like have a harder time stopping, because as I was saying, I'm so attached to it. But, that's what the first one that came to mind. I think it's like, if it's something that's truly just like discretionary or for pleasure or whatnot, and it's like something I've self-created or self-imposed, I guess, that at the moment when I'm like no longer enjoying it at all, when I'm not giving my best, when it's like, instead of being something, refreshing and life-giving, it's completely life-draining. Like, and that means that... and dreadful. And every time I, come to the table to do it, it's just like gives me anxiety or whatnot. I think that will be the moment where I'm like, you know what, this isn't for me. Love still taking the chance to try it. Even outside the project or the creativity realm, it's the same thing with workouts. Like I've given, the gym a chance many times, or other activities, running. Like I wanted to be a runner so bad. But you know what? Just because it seems, like you're a runner. It's like it has a certain flair to it. But at the end of the day, I was like, I'm not enjoying it. I don't get the runner's high, whatever. And so my knees hurt. I'm probably injuring it more. And it just gets to a point where you're like, you know what? I think it's time to like stop. Or again, pivot, right? Like my embroidery didn't work. I didn't pivot to anything else, but I'm like grateful that I tried it. But I'm just gonna kind of move on from this, right? And so I think that, but again, still working on that process with those things that I hold, I guess, more closely, more near and dear. But having said that, I have started writing projects that even halfway through, I'm like, it's not that I will abandon you, but now's not the time. So I guess it's kind of keeping that that open mind.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Just in closing, for me, the only closing thought that kind of your thought kind of spurred is kind of being open to the beauty of the process, because I feel like people in the past, like I'm thinking of like old painters and poets and whatnot, because they were not on social media, because it didn't exist. They could try things out and put them out there. If they didn't work, they could stop, or they could pivot, or they could just decide to take a break, and nobody would bat an eye, because it wasn't out in the internet for everybody to see.
Yeah.
And they didn't feel like prisoners of this concept that other people created for them. So I feel like just embracing the beauty of the process, like trying something new. You know, we tried boxing, it worked, and we love it. I've tried to drag you to 7 spin classes, and like it doesn't work for you. And so same as you've tried to drag me to that class, and I'm like lost the whole time.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. So like it's okay, you know. That doesn't necessarily mean that like we're failures. It's just we're just going through life, embracing the process, and the things that stick, they stick, and you can keep doing them, and great. And the things that don't, they don't, and that's okay. And it's okay. There's a beauty in also just taking your own time. Like your blog is a thing that probably you do as a means of expression. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be blogging every single day, you know, for it to continue to be that thing. And it's not a stoppage, you know. So it's kind of like, I feel like that's that, just like embracing the beauty. And that's my last of the process. That's my last closing thought.
Yeah. Totally. No, I agree. So we'll leave this episode here until now. We hope you enjoyed it. We went kind of straight to the point because we are recording with a bit of a time crunch.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to do because you'll be traveling next week, which is fun. But we didn't want to miss one episode. So we'll see each other next week. Remember to follow us on our social media, Instagram and TikTok at MashtiaCo. We're also on YouTube and every single podcast platform. So if you want to subscribe, follow, like, all of that good stuff, we would really appreciate it, and share it with someone, a creative in your life, that you think would benefit from this content.
Totally.
Okay?
Bye.
That's that for now. Bye.